CNN put out this article comparing the housing market that we have right now to the housing market before the 2008 crash. And the similarity that they say that we have is nobody thought that we were in a real estate bubble before the 2008 crash. And they say that nobody thinks we're in a bubble in the housing market right now either, which has them worried. The article says most economists and investors aren't focused on the housing market right now. Their attention is on other factors like the labor shortage and decades high inflation and supply chain disruptions and of course the ongoing pandemic. And that's why this article says that people are ignoring this potential housing bubble that we have brewing. These next two lines are very interesting. It says that the good news is that very few economists believe that this current run-up in housing prices is a bubble that's about to burst. So that's good news. People don't think that we're in a bubble. The bad news is that practically nobody was worried about the housing bubble in 2007 either. Now what I want to do is really go over what this article is talking about before I go into my opinions, because obviously I have some of my own opinions, but I want to focus on what this article is saying. That way we can understand that side, and then I'm going to go into my thoughts on it. So the article starts by talking about what happened last time, and what it says is that back in 2005, the then chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, Alan Greenspan, came out and said, quote, that there is no housing bubble. Instead, he said that America has some bubbles in some housing markets, but there's no widespread housing bubble in the United States. They actually gave a direct quote from Alan Greenspan, and here's what he said. Quote, although a bubble in home prices for the nation as a whole does not appear likely, there does appear to be, at a minimum, signs of froth in some local markets where home prices seem to have risen to unsustainable levels. In other words, Alan Greenspan said that yeah, we might have some issues in the housing market, but it's really not that big of a deal, and it's not going to affect the entire housing market, and you don't even have to think about this housing bubble potentially affecting the entire financial system. We all know how that turned out. A big reason why people did not believe that we were in a housing bubble back before the 2008 crash, according to this article, is because you had people still buying homes even though home prices were going up. The article says that economists believed that the rising pace of home ownership meant that there was nearly an endless supply of buyers who would be able and willing to pay even though home prices have been surging. And that kind of sounds familiar, right? I mean, the reason why they thought that we were not in a housing bubble was because home prices kept going up and people kept finding the cash to pay. Now, obviously, there was different things going on then. It was very easy for you to get a loan, which made it more accessible for people to go out and buy homes even though they couldn't afford them. But that's what this article is saying. The reason why economists and investors and why the government and the Federal Reserve Bank did not think that we were in a housing bubble before the 2008 crash was because they thought that there was an endless supply of buyers. In other words, they thought that home prices could only go up and people will continue buying homes. So here's what they're saying. Back before the 2008 crash, we saw this massive run-up in home prices and people kept buying homes even though they couldn't afford them. And that was a big reason why this housing market bubble burst back before the 2008 crash. And you can take a look at how fast home prices were rising to get an idea of what was going on. Back in 2005, this was the previous record for the fastest home price growth in a year ever. And in 2005, we saw home prices grow by 14.4% in 1 year. Well, now in 2001, between 2020 and 2021, we broke that record. We blew it out of the water because we saw home prices grow by 19.9% between April of 2020 and April of 2021. And according to this article, kind of like last time, most economists think that home prices are going to continue growing at very high speeds. It says that Zillow has come out and said that we're going to see another 13.6% growth in home prices between September 2021 and September 22. And Goldman Sachs has come out and said that home prices will rise another 16% by the end of 2022. Those are pretty bold statements, even though Zillow has come out and said that they are ending their home flipping program because they're worried about the state of the housing market and they weren't able to liquidate their inventory of homes that they do have. And now at the other hand, they're also saying that they think home prices are going to continue going up quite a bit in 2022. So that's kind of an interesting statement. But we're also seeing home affordability at some of its lowest levels ever. The article says that by just about every measure, home affordability has plunged even as record low mortgage interest rates have kept home payments in check. So to put that in perspective, we are seeing some of the fastest home price growth in history. That's nothing new. And part of the reason for that was in 2020, we didn't really see much home price growth because people were worried about this pandemic and you weren't seeing that big boom in 2020 that you saw in 2021. And on top of that, you have home affordability at some of the lowest levels ever, even though we have mortgage rates at the lowest levels ever. So you can go out and qualify for a cheap mortgage, but home prices are way up here. So what happens if mortgage rates start to go up? Because the Federal Reserve Bank keeps saying that they want to raise interest rates as a way to mitigate inflation. And so if we see interest rates go up and home prices are way up here, now homes are going to be way more expensive because now you're going to have to pay more money on your debt. And this brings me to the final part of this article, which is the belief that prices will not crash this time. And to answer this question, they brought on the senior economist and co-founder of the Center for Economic Policy and Research, Dean Baker, who said that, quote, "I don't think that we're going to see prices fall by 20 to 30% again, like we saw happen before 2008. He says, quote, "I don't think that there's that kind of story out there," but he says that a modest rise in interest rates could lead home prices to slide between 5 and 6%. And the reason for why they think that we're not going to see the type of housing market crash now, like we saw before 2008, is because we have stronger underwriting standards now than we had before 2008. Before the 2008 crash, if you wanted to go out and get a loan, it was very easy. I mean, you could qualify for a loan even if you didn't have a job, even if you didn't have any assets, because everybody thought home prices only went up. So you could go to the bank without a job, without assets, without cash in the bank, and they would still give you a mortgage. You're not saying that nowadays, and because of these stronger underwriting practices, they don't believe that we're going to see the same type of housing market crash. So now let's talk about this, because CNN says that the reason why we could potentially be in the biggest real estate bubble since 2008 is because we have home prices growing way faster now than we had before the 2008 crash. And because of that, and because of the fact that most economists don't think that we are in a housing market bubble, that is the reason why we are in a housing market bubble. This is what CNN is saying. And this is kind of like the TLDR. So now, if we try to analyze this, we have to look at first the housing market by itself, and then we have to look at the economy, because housing prices are determined by supply and demand. When you have more buyers than sellers, this will push home prices up. When you have more sellers than buyers, this will push home prices down. So if we start by trying to understand the supply and demand, this will help us give us a good framework of what's going on in the housing market. The reason why we've been seeing so much demand for homes right now is because, one, people wanted to take advantage of these low mortgage rates, and then second, people wanted to upgrade their homes because people wanted to move out of the cities, they wanted to move into the suburbs because now they're able to work from home, and if they lived in the suburbs, now they want a bigger home because they're spending more time at home with the ability to work from home. So people want an office in their homes, so people wanted to upgrade because of that, and because people wanted to take advantage of these cheaper mortgage rates. You were able to now go out and get a home that's more affordable, even though it's more expensive because the mortgage rates were lower. But now we're starting to see that kind of flip again because mortgage rates are still down here, but home prices have grown so much where now it is more expensive for you to go out and buy a home, even though mortgage rates are less, just because you're having to borrow more dollars. The concern and the question is, when are we going to run out of buyers? Because if we run out of buyers, then that's going to force sellers to cut their prices. We're already starting to see that happen, but if we run out of buyers, then sellers are not going to have an option but to cut their prices because now no one's going to be buying their homes. What we've been seeing happen up until now is you might have a home worth, let's say, $300,000. You list your home for $300,000, and over the weekend, you're going to get 40 different offers on your home. And so now your home that's worth $300,000 has offers for $330,000. And now you sold your $300,000 home for $330,000. This is where your neighbor comes out and say, "Holy moly, you sold your home for $330,000? Let me list my home for sale too." Now your neighbor lists their home for $330,000, and then they get offers, they get a bidding war, and now they get to sell their home for $345,000. And then their neighbor says, "Wow, you sold your home for $345,000, and then they list their home for $370,000. And now this person who listed their home for $370,000 is saying, "Wait, I'm not getting the same number of offers that you did, so let me cut the price of my home to now $345,000, hoping that they're going to be able to sell their home for around $345,000. This is exactly what that MarketWatch article was talking about. The title is, quote, "More sellers are cutting their list price." Here's exactly what economists and analysts think will happen next. The reason why we're seeing people cut the list price of their homes now is not because we're seeing a home price crash right now. It's because home prices have already run up so much that you have this whole kind of world of sellers now listing their home prices for way above what their home would have been worth just 12 months ago or 18 months ago. And so now, because the same amount of buyers aren't there, they're forced to cut their prices down to something a little bit more reasonable. Still way higher than it was a year ago, but a little bit more reasonable than it was a month ago. If you enjoyed this short clip from my longer videos, here's another clip that I think you'll love. And while you're at it, if you're interested in learning more about how to start generating passive income, our team put together an amazing guide that goes over what passive income is, how how to start generating passive income, and different passive income strategies. These are things that you can start doing even if you don't have a lot of money. So if you want to read this free guide on how to start generating passive income for free, all you got to do is click that button right over there. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep hustling.